Good morning and welcome back to the Hyrox Coaching Podcast, episode 7. We're going to talk race strategy this morning, quick review of last week's races, look forward to this weekend's race, a new little segment that we'll do with wins of the week, and then work from there. So, morning, Chris.
Good morning to you, Aaron. How are we?
Yeah, good. Looking forward to
Always
this. I think race strategy and pacing is something that along with Fred, I don't shut up about. So it's pretty much what I talk to people about almost every day. I think we talk about it every now and then as well. So it's good to get into the weeds and see where we're thinking about how to attack a race and where not maybe to attack it.
Yeah, look, I'll be interested to see. We've got some show notes that you've kindly done, and you'll probably drive this with your level of race experience, and yeah, it might lead into this conversation around how you sort of train for certain parts of the race and how you're pacing. So I'm probably looking forward to learning from you as much as the input I have.
Cool. Let's have a look at these races then from last weekend. So there was two pretty far apart. One in Taipei in Taiwan, so closer to you than me, and then for laser, which was in Brazil, starting to take off down there. But so in Taipei in the men's pro race, Pierre Algret. I think that none of the times were that good. I don't know if it's too fast a course. 58:21 down there or over there. And then in the women's race was Calypso Sheridan with an hour and 3 seconds. So close.
Yeah.
I think she had a good battle with Jess, right?
Yeah, I think she ended up beating Jess by maybe 90 seconds. I was following that online. It was pretty close until I want to say the lunges, and then I think maybe perhaps even the farmers, and then I know Sheridan went unbroken, and I think Jess had maybe a 4:20. Perhaps the end result made it seem like it wasn't quite so close, but they probably came into wall balls not more than 20 or 30 seconds apart. But that's a very impressive result from her. Yeah, it wasn't a slow course. It was very busy. I did see some footage. It was heaving, but from all reports, pretty good sled. So I think, would you say it's fast or slow? When the course is busy, I've followed Molly and Gabby's race, Molly's husband, live streamed it. And it was pretty chockers, and not a lot of people were obeying the fast lane. So I think good quality course in terms of the sleds. There was no issues there, but just quite busy. So you're probably not going to run two blazing at a time, but I think a pretty big PB for her, and 3 seconds off 60 minutes. So it's sort of set up, probably a pretty exciting APAC Elite 15 race.
Good. And then in the men's pro doubles, I think James Kelly and Matt Slee ran a 50-50 to take the win for that. And then obviously they secured their spot for the APAC regional there. I think you had a couple of your guys racing as well, who also secured spots.
Yeah, so the Taipei was a race that quite a few of the Aussie guys and girls went to. As I mentioned, sort of Molly and Gab went there to get a time, and so did I think it's the last race before you can get a qualifying time for Brisbane. So yeah, there was some pretty good quality in the doubles, and I was fortunate enough to have 4 guys in there that sort of all got their tickets. They'll be participating in the pro doubles, which is cool.
And then the women's race was, like you said, Molly and Gabrielle or Gabby. They won in 55:08, so pretty tasty. If that was a really busy course, like you said. So,
yeah,
cool. Is there? I think you pronounce it in Brazil. So it's in the north part of Brazil. So the men's pro, Portuguese fellow that is actually often about the European screen, Yao Almeida. So he ran an hour and 49 seconds. So picked up 105 points for him. Like a 57 guy, I think, something around about that time over here. So very good at the stations. Always got a really good weekend. Had a few races against him. And then the women's pro was Carola Vergara Ferreira in 1:11.50. So fair whack difference from over in Taiwan. And then in the pro doubles men was Cal Asar, I can't even pronounce Asaya and Bruno Carvalho, 55:12. So I'm going to book my tickets over to Sao Paulo. So there, it seems to be the place to go. It's just like a 15-hour flight now, I think. So, and then in the women's pro doubles, Mariana and Monique, 1 hour 9 and 1 second. So obviously this is only the second or third South American race, so it's picking up a bit of steam. Brazil is, I know they were keen to get that. Brazil's like the 3rd biggest fitness market in the world, so I'm sure it will pick up some steam down there and start to get some people. I've had a few people two people from down there message me already looking at programs. This is already starting to create some noise, which is good.
Do you have any idea about what the numbers were like? Was it a 2-day event? I should have been across it, but was it a 2-day event or just a single day? Or
I think it was 2 days, yeah. So we'll, but yeah, it was decent. It's good to see it growing everywhere again. So just more places for us to go visit, I suppose. Anyways, air miles. But yeah. So this weekend then is the uh, regional for
North America.
America, or the North America was
Yeah.
the whole of America, so North and South, yeah. So the Americas.
And Canada.
Yeah, yeah. And then so the depth again we talked about last week. So at the top of that, there's obviously some wickets, and we've Dylan Scott, Rich Ryan, then I think Cole's third ranked for the time, right? And the
Yeah,
top two
he'd be
obviously
third ranked.
qualified already. So he's a good chance of coming out there and getting his place to world champs. But I think Jack Driscoll, is it O'Driscoll? Jack Driscoll.
Just Driscoll, yeah.
The bloke knows how to win a race, yeah. He did it again. So it could be a good battle with those two. See how it goes. It'll be interesting to watch. In the women's race, I think it's Lawrence to lose, isn't it?
It's a good prize. I mean, it's a pretty generous prize purse. I think the regionals, I think a 15 grand US for the winner, and then it tiers down. So it's certainly a race you want to be podium in, and a good little prize packet. And then, but yeah, you'd have to say, obviously, I'm biased because I coach Cole, but he's in good form, and we spoke this morning, and you can't discount any other guys, and you don't know just what type of block people have had, and people have made big improvements in short space of time. I know, obviously Jack Driscoll's training well, and he's continuing to improve. Stephen Polkifer trains 30 hours a week with Dylan Scott, so would it be unheard of if he had a sort of breakout race and ran a high 50, low 55, high 54? Maybe not. So I think it'll be a good race, and obviously with Dylan and Rich racing, I think it should be pretty competitive because neither of them are, super front runners. It's not going to be a race to the ski. So I think it should be a pretty good battle until perhaps the burpees, and then I think probably the top 3 or 4 will pull away slightly, but you just never know what happens during racing. So it's good to televised on YouTube, just like a normal Elite 15 race. My understanding is it's not a grid race. Whether the coverage would be quite as good as a grid, probably not, but it should be good to watch.
Yeah, I think it's you don't know what's going to happen because some of the people that have entered this race probably their times haven't got them anywhere near an Elite 15 race, but this for them is their Olympics. So they, if they've got in here, they may take a big risk. Things might pay off, and it could be interesting. There's pros and cons to this kind of format. I think I'd probably do it later on, but it's definitely a talking point. The regionals are definitely a good idea.
Yeah.
I think it definitely brings the sport on more. Anyway, so yeah, cool. All right, let's get into the race strategy then. I think if we start, this could go on for a while because I can talk about it. We'll start with solo racing and how I approach it and how I advise other people to approach it. And I have a generic-ish kind of model, but obviously everyone is slightly different. But most of the things that I say kind of are 95% approachable by everybody or applicable by everybody. So we'll leave the running to the end because it's the biggest part. We'll go through the stations first. So obviously, number one, the biggest, I think the biggest banana skin in the whole of the race, and we talked about it before, is the SkiErg, right? So this has the ability to, although it's not mechanically taxing, so like the sleds after are going to pay a bigger toll on your body than the ski. The metabolic cost of hammering the ski is very high. Like it is full body. Your legs don't get the pounding. It's a lot of hip hinging, so it's posterior chain stuff. If your technique is not that great, there's over reliance on the upper body, shoulders, triceps, even biceps get hammered, and you produce a shitload of lactate. I've done a lactate test on the ski, and it blew my mind how high lactate got before my heart rate even got over 100 beats a minute. Like at 215 pace, my heart rate's like 95 on the ski probably, but my lactate was over 3 already, 3 millimoles, like 95. And I think at race pace it got up to like 8, maybe 9 millimoles, which is a lot of lactate to already be producing high. And then once I got up to probably like 2K pace, it was well over 10, 11 millimole of blood lactate, which is high. And you've got to do something with it. It doesn't just bugger off on its own because you've gone for a run after. So you need to be really, really controlled on the ski. I think the first run into the ski are really important. I have always recommended that for most people, if you do a 2K test at some point in your training, because it isn't too taxing, like K is about as long as you can go before your form starts to fall apart. You can obviously pace it really badly and go out too fast in the first K, then you probably just need a retest. If you can pace it pretty comfortably and get the heart rate up high enough, steady across it without a big drop off, that 2K time gives you a good line in the sand to work for your pace on the race. I never say, like, in the running, don't ask me what pace to run, but this is a real tangible pace you can use for the ski because it's on the screen in front of you. That is the actual pace you're going at. For me, for most people, going 7 to 10 seconds per 500 meters slower than 2K pace or your 2K best pace is probably about right. And you could probably call that like 5 to 8K pace if you were really good at skiing. So for me, it comes in at like between 150 and 152. And if I run at ski at 152, I might lose 3 or 4 seconds, but I feel way better coming out the back of it. And it only takes that little tiny bit to go over. So you might be able to ski a 145, but that could, the wattage you put out or the power you put out on that could be so high that you're already digging yourself a hole for a race that's still going to go on for another 45 to however long it takes you, 75 minutes after that. Is losing 10 seconds here going to pay dividends in the back end is what you need to ask yourself.
Yeah, we spoke about this before the show. As I was saying to you, I was talking to Cole this morning, and we sort of discussed the races that he has run his PBs. He was skiing at about a 147 to 148. His two first and most recent Elite 15 races, he sort of had dropped that to around that 144, 145. I think you just, Elite 15, it's a bit exciting. You've got, some incredible athletes next to you, and he felt that perhaps that cost him just a little bit in the back half of the race, in the fact that, he's done a 220 lunge in pro solo and a 320 wall and he wasn't just able to quite replicate that, even though he felt like he's had better fitness. So we sort of discussed pulling that back, and then I did the math. It's one of those things. They say you go from a 145 to a 148 average. It sounds like nothing. 3 seconds sounds like nothing. It's that sort of, it's a bit misguiding because, it's just 3 seconds per 500. But in terms of power output, it's huge. A 144 to 145 ski average is pretty close to 300 watts. Anyone knows that the sort of power that 300 watts takes to generate, even on a bike, is it's reasonably hard work. To do it on a ski is even higher. And what you articulate, obviously, that your lactate really shoots up, but I think it could be a little bit misleading because you don't feel that fatigue in your legs, but you've still got the lactate in your system. And I think and for reference, so then a 148 is about 265 watts. So it's about an 8% difference, which is huge. It'd be the difference between running a 330 and a 336. It's that stark a difference. And everyone obviously knows, like, to try to just push 6 seconds per kilometre an hour quicker would be foolish. And I think for a lot of people, even well-trained people, doing it on the ski, I think it's really the first place where you can completely derail your race. Obviously, things can happen later in the race, but if you think about the aerobic system and how it's warming up, you're in this really sort of funny little time period where even if you've had a good warm up, you've sat in the start tunnel for at minimum 10 minutes, maybe more. You are cooling down to an extent. Adrenaline's really high, norepinephrine's really high, so there's a lot of excitement, which I think suppresses a little bit of sort of pain in terms of you're in this really big sympathetic overdrive, like you're pumped, you go out, you're in this really vulnerable state to not actually be able to feel how hard you're running and how hard you're skiing. And I think almost everyone has done it once where they've just run a little bit too hard retrospectively, and they go, well, it felt easy, and then skied 3 or 4 seconds quicker than they'd ever done in training, and it's just a fucking disaster. To pull back, you would more or less have to, jog that second run. But again, it's also very misleading is not the right word, but like I said, that lactate is through the roof, but because the fatigue you haven't accumulated in your legs, you still run quite quick after the ski. You see more often than not the run after the ski is the fastest runs. You've just dug yourself into just a fucking an acid bath that hits you on the sleds, and then that's all she wrote. So I think people need to understand, like you said, that what seems like a little bit like you said, 3 or 4 seconds is a huge differential in power. And if you can understand that, it's the difference between feeling good on the ski, feeling completely in control, and just tipping over to a point where I think it's, like I said, it's near on impossible to really pull it back and have a great race. You might be able to finish strong, but you're gonna suffer through it. But I think anyone that's had their best race is going to feel good coming off the ski, not like, shit, I've pushed it just that little bit too hard.
Yeah, I think if you're asking yourself that question already by the end of the ski, or you're feeling that you've pushed it too far, you definitely have. Even if you think about when you do like a VO2 max session, the first rep or 2 reps probably isn't even that hard. Very controllable, hopefully.
Yeah.
So you could do that in a Hyrox, but you are using way too much power already for a session that's not broken up into small intervals with big rests. So you can go VO2 max and feel controlled for 5 to 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and then after that you're in a real hole. So I think don't do anything different that you do in training. So like don't go in there playing with a damper. If you set the damper to 4 in training or 5, stay with that, put it on that, keep the same kind of rhythm, find that stroke rate that works for you in training, whether it's like 35 to 45 or whatever, probably around the right for most people. Everyone's slightly different. Like if you're a bigger, heavier athlete, you're probably going to be able to pull longer strokes and have a lower stroke rate. If you're smaller and a bit lighter, you're probably going to have a higher stroke rate. But you need to practice that in training and find the balance of where your stroke rate and pace comes in, that your heart rate doesn't spike up too much, or you can find a balance that's in that kind of zone 3 tempo-ish zone. Like in training, the pace that if you did that pace for a K, like after a jog, you'd probably be in zone 3, and that's cool. But when you're in the race, like you said, and all the adrenaline's pumping and stuff, your heart rate's up and it will be higher and you'll come off it higher. It's hotter, the air's dry. So you just need to stay in control. If we put this into RPE, because that's all I chat about, you're 5 to 6 is what the ski wants to be. And there is no point it being a 7 or 8. Like, even if you're really, really good at skiing, like, you can ski a 6-minute 2K, there's no point sending it. You just as well drop it back 5 seconds and use that extra power for the things that are to come, because they will slow you down.
Yeah, even if, say you were the best skier in Hyrox versus someone that was doing say if you could do a 140 in race versus just like yourself, like 150, 151, like 20 seconds is actually, it's nothing in the scheme of the race. Like, in terms of the negative flow on effect it has from going those 3 seconds faster to even going 3 seconds slower than in training, there's very little time to be lost, and it's ultimately going to cost you so much on the back end. I think, like I said, the ski, you can undo your race, and going 3 seconds too fast on the ski probably costs you 90 seconds on the wall balls. Like that's the sort of debt you start accruing very early in the race that you pay for at the end. And if you could just be very controlled metabolically, in particular at the start of the race, your ability to actually carry that on throughout the race remains so much higher. And again, obviously things can happen in the race. I've said to athletes that the first ski run is really the only place you can completely undo yourself in the race. And I don't know if you agree with that, but I think that you can absolutely ruin 12 weeks of hard training by just being too ambitious in that first 11 to 12 minutes.
Yeah, I think if you add the sled push onto the end of that as well, you can totally be gone within 15 minutes, because we'll move on to like the sled push. This can really catch people out. I don't know the conversations between the carpet doing its business and the types of sled, whether they're new and out the packet, whether they move fast. I think whether they move fast or whether they don't, you still need to have a strategic plan going into this so that you don't go too anaerobic too early. Because like we talked about the other week, and having that anaerobic battery or the anaerobic capacity and burning it out too early, it doesn't feel quick. So for me, there is absolutely no benefit in doubles different race. In a solo race, there's absolutely no benefit in an open or a doubles, in an open or a pro to pushing the first full length, because you already start to build up an anaerobic cost that you're going to have to pay for later on. So you're better off taking a short recovery even in the first length. So for most people, I would say even just pushing half length and keeping a regimented split time of whatever it is, depending on how good you are, like to practice it in training. For me, in a pro race, I probably rest like 8 to 10 seconds for every pause and at every end. And that means I can still push it in 2.5 minutes. But
Yep.
when I do that, I can run out of it well as well. So and then in an open race, I and probably only rest for 4 to 5 seconds. And at the end, it's pretty much a turn around and go again. But those short rests are enough just to keep me under that real anaerobic build up, because you can feel it in your legs coming and you think, oh, it's all right. But if you've got to the point pushing that sled where your legs start to scream, you've gone too far. Like, and the fast length, it can draw you in because you've come in, and if you pace the first part okay, and you come in and you do the first full length, you might get through it, but you will slow down after that. I think unless you're a real sled monster. On the whole, I think taking prescribed, preordained breaks is far smarter than just going in and hammering it the first length and a half, and then having to take massive breaks, burning a lot of glycogen, and going real anaerobic early. So have those planned breaks in. But all of this should be practiced in training first of all. Basically, don't go getting carried away on race day and just pushing it, because even if it feels light, there's still a cost there to it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100. So do you count your rest in your head? Do you count backwards from 10, or is it sort of intuitive? I know you've done a lot of races, but what do you tell your athletes? I tell them a number of breaths. I usually just say 5 deep breaths. But I agree wholeheartedly. Again, unless you're really a monster on the sled, comfortable doing it in training, the first leg unbroken. Obviously, a couple of my top guys do that, but they are trying to sort of qualify for Worlds. But I think for most everyone else, because I think it's about being in control of the brakes, like you said. So when you're pushing a sled, you've got this big anaerobic component. You just cannot move that weight predominantly aerobically unless you move at a snail's pace, and it is a race. So you have to account for the fact there is going to be a large amount of anaerobic energy production to get that thing moving and keep it moving. And all you're really trying to do is control the amount of lactate and hydrogen ions that are building up. And that, again, that has to be intuitive. You can feel it because, like you talked about with the ski, I've not known someone that's done any lactate testing on a sled, but I assume it would be very high if you tried to do it unbroken, and it probably wouldn't hit you straight away either, because it's not demanding from a sense of burpees where you're out of breath. It sort of hits you later. You get it's this big shunting of all these byproducts, and then it hits you, and you become out of breath when your aerobic system is trying to clear that energy. So really what you want to do is be in control of when that happens. So say, for example, you push it half a length and that takes you up to 7 or 8, that 10 seconds. If you've got a good aerobic capacity, your slow twitch fibers will then sort of metabolize that lactate, and then you can go again. Like you said, I think it's important to be in control, whatever that rest period is, whether it's 5 breaths, 10 seconds, because if you overdo it, you end up resting for 12, for 14 seconds. Then you have to break every quarter. Then you're resting for 15 seconds at each length. And all of a sudden, when you can comfortably do it in 2:30 and run out of the station, that then becomes a 3:20. And again, sort of like with the ski, you found yourself just in this big hole where if you're just in control, you leave yourself in a position to run out and run well and still be in control metabolically.
Yeah. So I use my watch for it. So the only thing I have on my watch when I'm racing is lap time, and I have my heart rate, but I don't really pay much attention to it, like I said. So I use the lap button, and every time I go in the in arch or the out arch, I just press lap. That way I know if I get to the arch and it's at like 2:30, I know it's another lap to go. I count them anyway, but it's a reassurance thing. Or if I've gone past 3:40 or whatever, I know I've gone too far. So I use that. So when I stop pushing, I just look down. If it'll be 27 seconds, I'll rest to whatever it is in the race, cool. 37 seconds or 32 seconds, and then go again. But yeah, I just try to stay, take a good couple of breaths, wipe the sweat off my face, and then go again. You need to practice it in training and just do what you've been doing in training. It will be different on the day, but you can if your calves and quads start screaming and you've only done a length and a half, you've pushed it too far. You want to stop before you get that burn. In some places, and the Spanish sleds are notoriously hard, we don't know why, but if you have to break it into thirds, there's no issue with that. If you break it into thirds, push it a little bit, breathe. I know there's a little bit more force required to get it moving again, But on these new carpets, it really ain't that bad unless it's all completely
Yeah.
crumpled up. And as long as you don't lift it, it slides across the top. I think have a plan and just stick to it. And don't panic here because this sled push gets all of the news headlines about it, and it being such a big thing. I don't think it's such a massive thing if you pace the first two runs and the ski well and you stick to your plan with the sled push. It's not that much of a limiter as long as you're smart. But there's nothing we can do to help you if you've sent the ski in the first two runs. People that talk about it being really heavy and really hard, those people have paced it poorly. It's not that heavy. It's not that hard. I don't even weigh that much, and I don't find the pro sled, like even at Worlds when people were crying that they were super heavy. I didn't find it that heavy because I paced it smartly into it. But if you are already super anaerobic,
Yeah.
yeah, it's heavy because you've got nowhere to go. You're at the top already. Your body can't magically create energy and wattage to move that thing out of thin air. You fucked it yourself.
Yeah, and I mean that's probably it's probably worth explaining the physiology. So like we said, if you run too hard, ski too hard, run too hard. If in a race if you paced it well, maybe you're at 7 millimole of lactate, but you've skied too hard, then run too hard. And again, it's very deceptive because it will often you often won't feel it, but you might be at like 12 or 13 millimole by the time you get to the sled, and you still might not be feeling. You might be feeling good, and then you do that first length unbroken, and fuck you might be at like 17 or 18, and then you've got no capacity to continue to produce force. And that's when you hear people, fuck, the sled was really heavy, the sled was hard. It's like there's of course been times that has been documented, that famous video of the chap at Worlds where his sled literally was fucking in mud and then he's run across, like, okay, he got a bad sled, fair enough. I would say the vast majority of people that have gone, the sleds were really heavy, it's like you probably didn't pace it well and you've just created such chaos metabolically that it really shows up on the sled. And like you said, you've probably run through the first length and then that's all she wrote.
Yeah, so that's it for the sled push, really.
Yeah.
Like you just be smart, break it up, and take your time. Like losing 10 to 15 seconds there because you had an extra two breaks is again nothing. It's a long way to go still. Where if you're going backwards, you will go back. You could lose that on the next run easily. Like depending on how, even if you are super quick, you could probably run the next run okay. Then you've got the bad boy. If you're in a pro race, the sled pull is for me is the biggest breaker in the field because you could have people pulling at 3 minutes. But if you go into here, you're going to be 5.5, 6 minutes, no problem. Like if you pace this well, this is where you can really start to be nice and smooth.
9 minutes if you're a professional triathlete.
Yeah, yeah. So, but it will get you if you haven't improved your technique in training and you go into here fully gassed. 150 kilos and for men and 103 whatever it is for women is a decent weight to be pulling, and especially at the end of a 12.5 meter rope. So for me, there's some easy wins you can have with this, and like with these new center ropes, they're a little bit stretchier. So before you even start tugging on that, if you're doing a pro race, make sure you take all the slack out of it for the first 2 or 3 pulls, because if you don't take all the slack out of the rope, you're wasting energy and it's not very efficient. That energy you're using to pull the slack before you move, the same as if you think of a deadlift, when you do a deadlift, you take that first initial little bit of slack off the bar and then you pull, right? The same with the sled pull. You want to take the slack off the rope before you move. And the best, you want to be using like as much as being as efficient as you possibly can. So using gravity to help you because that doesn't cost you anything. So you don't want to be super deep in the squat and having to do a reverse, like stand up squat and then lean backwards. You need to get the timing right with opening the hips up and falling backwards. And it's a little bit harder actually on the new carpets because they're a little bit slipperier because your feet dig into the thicker pile. The old carpets are pretty easy to do this, but working on that, opening the hips up and driving back at the same time is a way to save yourself some energy costs on this. But it's all about rhythm, the sled pull. There's no way we can say to you, do pace it this way. You need to just keep the rhythm going and keep breathing and keep working through it. If you are gassed and you walk across the middle to get a couple extra breaths in instead of running across, that's cool because like you only lose 2 or 3 seconds and it might be enough just to get your breath back to start the first couple of pulls that are the hardest anyway, strong. But you just need to stay on top of the rope, and stay on top of your rhythm. Make sure you're not throwing it into the box next to you. You can throw it out the back of the box, although it's a bit of a pain in the ass. And at the minute, the sled pull seems to be a real big place that judges want to give you a 15-second penalty for getting anywhere near those white lines. Work out how many steps you can do without going near it. I think it's probably about 4 or 5 little steps for most people, like, and stay there. Don't push your luck, because one extra half step is not worth a 15-second penalty, and they will give it to you.
Yeah, it's probably not a pacing tip, but it's something I sort of tell my clients. I try to teach people that, there's two components there's two components of the sled push and the sled pull, but it's like you've got to, if you understand inertia, things in motion stay in motion, things at rest stay at rest. So there's two components to the sled pull. So there's getting it moving and then keeping it moving, and an object in motion stays in motion. Much easier, and the force to keep something moving is easier than to get it moving. So yeah, exactly what you said about there's no need to squat into it. You want to do as little as possible to get it moving, because that's what requires the most force. So it's almost, I don't even like people that say you should train the deadlift to do sled pull. It's really not. It's almost a quad drive and then almost a back extension. It's not to say you should be doing shitloads of back extension in training, but certainly practice being as efficient as possible at getting it moving, and then you want to be as efficient as possible at keeping it moving. And one big thing you see a lot of in videos is people taking big steps back. I think you should almost shuffle, because unless if you're at a normal race, quite often that box is small. If you're fortunate enough to be in one of the elite races or the pro races, or you're first there and you've got a box, you've got a bit more leeway with your rope. But certainly in most races, the area to control your rope is pretty small. So do yourself some favors and almost like shuffle, slide your feet back. Don't take steps, because if the rope sort of is in the way, you can almost move it out the way with your feet. If you're taking big leaping steps back, the likelihood that you stand on the rope is higher. And that's really, I guess, all the pacing strategy. And try to control your breath as well. Don't hold your breath when you do it. And then the basic stuff, don't get any penalties, because it's just an extra 15 seconds is pretty avoidable. And I also think it's such a technique driven station. It's almost like move a bit slower to move faster. Take a little bit more time to get to the front of the box, put your feet where they need to be, pick the rope up properly. If you rush it, like you're probably going to do things clumsily. You're probably going to get a penalty. You're probably just moving too fast. Again, if you watch, I think Ronkovic is probably the best in the world. He doesn't look frantic when he's doing a sled pull. It's rhythmic. It's very smooth, and he does the pro sled in 240 or 250. So maybe take that advice. Use it as a station to like focus on technique. Take an extra few moments setting up, like you said. Take the tension out of the rope, because if the first bit of force you impart is literally just pulling slack out of the rope, you fucking wasted a lot of energy. And again, that just takes an extra second. Like pull it tight, whether you're putting the rope down or keeping it in your hand. And just like what you do in training is what you do in the race. The other thing is manage your rope, because if you step on the rope and fall over, there's another 6-8 seconds, and then you get flustered.
Yeah, there's just a waste of time. They didn't need to do it. So yeah, just controlled aggression is like the main point there. Yank it, but don't go rushing, I think is pretty key. Because I think with it open, it's even more frantic, because you can probably make up some time there. Yeah. Because it's not heavy, but it's very easy to still end up out of control, and then like trying to yank it too hard or pulling it, and then it can chaotic. Like last week in Poland, I did the open in the morning, and I pulled the first 3/4 of a length with holding onto the rope, and then I was like, "Why are you keeping on to the rope? You don't do this." So then, like, remember to throw it down. Keep doing what I'm doing. For me, dropping it down means I can almost go through steps in my head. Drop, lean, pull. Drop, lean, pull. Whereas if I keep it in my hands, I don't. Maybe I'm too stupid to do two things at once. So drop it, lean, and then pick it back up and go. I think it just sets me in a nice rhythm.
I've always dropped. I find it's easier to manage it as well. You can sort of, when you put it down, you can make somewhat of a pile. I find when you're pulling it back, you're not really in control where that bundle goes. But that's just personal preference. It can train. The pull is something you just need to train often. It's such a technique that responds well, like to anything, to becoming more efficient. And you can't get more efficient at sled pull by doing anything other than sled pull. You can do supplementary things like sled drags, and sure, you can do deadlifts and pull downs to strengthen the back, but like you just have to practice that technique.
Yeah, there's three things that are in my program, or all my programs every week, and at least once, and that's sled pull, obviously wall balls, and running.
Yeah.
Um, I think even just spending 10, 15 minutes a week playing with sled pull is decent just to keep your hand in it and just to work out where it's moving. I like to keep the heart rate in a like moderate during training. So I just flick between like 2 minutes to 3 minutes on usually a salt bike because it's pretty easy for me to keep my weedy little arms with a heart rate and keep the heart rate at like, high zone 2, low zone 3. So that I just flick between that and doing 3 minutes of sled pull for 15 to 20 minutes. And at the end of a strength session, I think it's just enough to keep your hand. And then when you do your more Hyrox type sessions, having it in there as well, and just finding the rhythm that you can hold that's maintainable and repeatable. So it's very easy to do 3 minutes very fast and then pile yourself in like everything. So it's again that repeatability and nice rhythm with it, which and with rhythm probably takes us nicely onto the burpees because this is probably the part of the race where people start to really feel the effects of that first part because that back end of the first half. For me, this is about efficiency, and everyone's slightly different. I'm an old man, so I use the kneel up technique. And for most people, I think the kneel up technique is going to leave you in the best place coming out for the next run and the rest of the race. But it needs to be practiced. And if you practice this, you can go pretty fast. With 100% kneel up, I've done the 80 meters in 2:34. So it's pretty fast. Like it's not. It's about keeping the rhythm, staying low, and moving it. You need to practice it in training. But depending on what you do in training and what your hip mobility, because there's no way my hip mobility lets me do 80 meters of a step up. And Hunter Hop is just not for solo race. Like he can do it, he's a monster, but I don't think anyone's going to benefit from doing that efficiency wise over the 80 meters and be able to finish the race well. And so I think either step up or kneel up is where you need to go. But my advice is if you're going to use kneel up, just start with kneel up. Don't go in with and start doing step up. Do 5 to 10 reps, jack your heart rate up, and then go to kneel up and be basically crawling up off the floor. So there are plenty of technique videos out there, and some on my Instagram if you look for how to do the kneel up efficiently. And you don't want to be standing up tall in between reps and taking massive jumps. You need to stay low and move fast, basically. If you can manage 80 meters of the step up technique, that's fine, right? But if you're going to start with a step up technique and get 10 to 15 reps in and then go to the kneel up technique, you're better off just starting with the kneel up and just going for that. Like that's obviously a race experience thing where if you've done that before, then stick with it. But I think, you practice it in training and it's the rhythm thing again. Like just keep working through. You don't want to be spending a massive amount of time lying on the floor, feeling sorry for yourself or stood up tall, having to take deep breaths. You just want to keep a nice steady rhythm throughout it. And you can do it pretty fast with whatever technique you pick as long as you keep moving. The best thing is one of the best pieces of advice is don't jump too far because if you start jumping too far, you will just overload yourself. You spike your heart rate, you recruit a lot of type 2 muscle fibers and you just, again, make it really hard for yourself. So keep the jumps moderate, practice doing that. Breathing's key in this because some reason it becomes really difficult to remember when to breathe when you're doing it. You go in, you do 10 reps and you think, shit, I forgot to breathe. And then all of a sudden you're about to pass out. So start with that rhythm and start your breathing early. So whether you jump, take a breath, or hit the floor, take a breath, and then just move through it so that you're constantly in a nice rhythm and a routine going through it. And everyone's different, but there is absolutely no point in massive jumps, totally sending the burpees and running like you would pretty much. We've seen it, people doing it to get the world's fastest time in burpees and then having to walk the rest of the race. It's an exercise that can throw you over the edge pretty easily. Although it's no external load, there's a lot of jumping in it. And depending on how good you are, there's probably 35 to, probably 80 jumps for some people, depending on their ability to jump. So it's a lot of work and they can drag out. And I've seen people's burpees go from low 2 minutes or up to 10 minutes plus.
DNF.
So you could be there for a long time, and you don't want to be. You just want to keep moving forward. So you don't want to be leaking time stood up. But if you've sent the first part of the race, you will lose time here because your legs will be knackered and you won't be able to jump anyway.
Yeah, I think just on that, much like the sled pull, that things in motion stay in motion. I think one thing that perhaps a good thing to do is to maybe film your technique. So there's sort of different parts of the burpee broad jump. Obviously, you've got the jump. The one thing I think I see people do that really easy to correct is that you want to carry the momentum forward from your step up into the jump. Because again, if you think things in motion stay in motion, you've got that forward momentum. So that's really important to then carry that through into the jump. So what you don't want to do is take that kneel up and then step up, stop, breathe, and jump. In my mind, the two places where you should, quote unquote, rest are on the catch or the landing. You can take a breath there because obviously you've already stopped. You're not going to jump again forward. You've got to stop. And then you go to the floor and you can take another breath. And I think taking a half second longer on the floor to then make sure that when you're standing up, you're continuing to move. Because again, if you think like standing up is one, you're getting off the floor, you're getting into motion. If you then stop and then have to accelerate and then create all that force again into the jump, you're more likely to use fast twitch fibers. Now, you're still going to use some fast twitch fibers in the jump, but if you can carry the momentum forward from the step, into the standing position, into the jump, that's more efficient. And then again, you can rest, in that catch position when you land, take a big breath, hit the floor, take another breath. And I think that then controls the cadence a lot more. Whereas if you're sort of a bit more sporadic, and like you said with breathing, and again, this all obviously comes back to training. What you practice in training at lower intensities and moderate intensities, you're more likely to be able to perform well at higher intensities. But if you can control, it's like anything, if you can control your breathing throughout a movement, you're much more likely to be able to control the tempo and not let it get out of control. That's what I'd say. Practice that in training. Maybe film yourself doing it. And if you find yourself, stopping and then trying to take this big jump, it becomes more inefficient than if you're able to carry just a little bit of that momentum through again. It's not that you're taking massive jumps, but you're already in motion. So you're just sort of carrying forward that momentum.
Yeah, even if you do 5 or 4 or 5 burpees in a nice little rhythm, and then you have to stop, depending on your capacity, to take a little bit of a short break. You're better off doing that than you are one burpee, stand up tall, take a couple of breaths, then jump, and then another burpee. You lose all your rhythm, like you say, and you lose all that forward momentum. So do a couple, then maybe take your breath standing up, burpee, and move on. Do it strategically. Do it if you do it in the gym and you've got a 10-meter track, ideal, because you do your 10 meters and then stop at the end, take a couple of breaths, turn around and go back the other way. Do the same in your race. So it's not new, it's not a shock. And if you've got here controlling the first half of the race pretty well, then they can go pretty well and you won't be going backwards. So rhythm, same, and just pacing up into it. So these are going to be like probably an 8 out of 10 if you want to go pretty well through them. But at least the second 40 meters probably will be, so you're going to be burning and then back out into the run. So the row, which gets a lot of talk as if almost it's a recovery station. And I think, you're going to sit down on your ass, your heart rate's going to drop. And actually, I get a massive drop when I sit on the row for the first 10 to 15 seconds. But here's where you can lose time here just fanning about. So you need to get in and get on that rower and start rowing as quick as possible. So if you're hopefully the feet straps have been loosened so you can slip straight in, but you need to get your ass on that rower and start pulling because every second you're not is still counting towards your row time. So get on, start rowing, tighten the straps up after. As long as your feet are on the plate, you're good to go. But here, my row pace usually comes out about the same as my ski pace, even slower 2K pace. So probably 10 to 15 seconds slower than 2K pace. But this is a really good point. If you've kind of overcooked the first half, that you could probably just lose 10 to 15 seconds by slowing right down to recover to have a stronger back half. So if you've made a mess of the front half, it's not full recovery and you're not going to be able to come back completely. You're probably better off just settling down and pulling, 20 seconds slower than 2K pace and losing another 10 seconds just to get the heart rate down and keep it down. And hopefully you keep it down, or you can get it down because you sat down as well, which helps a little bit. And I read a study yesterday about maximal lactate steady state testing. It's from the 90s, but they did a test of lactate across skiing, cycling, and rowing. And rowing was actually one of the lowest producers of lactate. It's a chance maybe to get it settled and let your body recover a little bit. You can hammer it, and I've tried to hammer the ski or stick to a set pace before, and it's never ended well. You definitely have to listen to your body on this one and settle
Yeah.
into it and keep it at like a 6 to a 7 out of 10, because there's just nothing to be gained from sending it unless you're a really good rower. And then even if you are a really good rower, like you said, Josh rows at 142. That's not crazy pace for a K, but he's probably
No.
recovering pretty well at that kind of pace. Whereas, at 149, 150, I'm still threshold, but low end of threshold.
And it ultimately doesn't make you up that much time. Even if you can do it at 142, yeah, it's what, say it's 16 seconds. That can be, you might, if you're a little bit sloppy getting your feet in and out, it's very unlikely to actually, you never see much disparity in the row times, even though obviously some guys are going quicker. It all seems to even out. And I think what you said is spot on. It has to be based on feel. I think with the ski, you can absolutely pick a pace and you should be able to hold it, pretty myopically. The row has to be a bit of a feels trip. If you're feeling good, it might end up a little quicker. It does have to be a real RPE based effort. Even if you're so used to doing it at 150 in training, if 153 feels right, just sit there and then be really sharp getting off. Because like you said, like if you're messy with your feet strap, or you make any silly mistakes, that costs you time as well. So try to get off as quickly as possible and get back into your running with a bit more pace, rather than trying to make up what ends up being so negligible in the scheme of the race.
Yeah, that honestly, that you practice your transitions on the row. Like for example, last year in Barcelona, I ran into the row next to Yannick, and we both got on the rower at the same time. But I both finished pretty much well. He finished just before me, but I got off at the same time because I didn't hang around. So he had to row 145 and I rode 150, and both our splits were exactly the same because I ran in, got on, didn't mess around, got my feet in and started rowing straight away. And at the end, at like 960, I loosened the straps but was still rowing. And then as soon as it got to 985, I put the handle down, waited for it to tick over, and then took my feet out and just ran straight off it. So I got 3 or 4 seconds at the end for free. 2 big tugs at 985 to go. For him to have to row 145 versus my 150, like you said earlier, that is a big power difference. Huge. They're probably very similar to what you said. So we're talking like 40 watts difference you have to produce. A little bit of smart maneuvering and practicing your transitions on the road could save you 10 seconds, and that's free time and free energy that you can use later on. If there's one, definitely practice transitions on that in a solo race.
Yep.
And then
and look, any energy that can be conserved at any point in the race can be utilised later. So, like you said,
Farmers carry. There's not a lot we can really say about this. Don't put them down. Chalk up, pick them up, and don't put them down. If you can't get through the full thing, go as far as you can, go as deep as you can. Because once you put them down once, your grip is really compromised, and you've probably wiped off most of the chalk. So then you're really hanging on for dear life. Go as deep as you can. Just grit your teeth and go. Try and keep your head up and look forward. Lock your arms into your side and move as quick as you possibly can. It's not a run. It's like a shuffle truffle. You look like a penguin running with those things. Go as deep as you can, because every time I see someone put them down, once they put them down once, it's every 20 or 30 meters after that. So if you can go as deep as you can, just grit it out. You feel great when you put them down when you come out the next run. It feels like you feel really light for the first 100 meters. So I don't know what else to do. Just don't put them down. Just practice. You'll grit your teeth. Hold the kettlebells however feels most comfortable for you. I've seen it 100 different ways, but closer to the front on the handles. Get them tight to your side so that you're not doing it. And don't do that stupid turn. Don't do the Japanese turn. It adds no time. It just changes your balance.
Very good. Yeah, nothing to add there. Agreed. Don't put them down.
Yeah, it's easier said than done, though.
Oh, look, at the end of the day, if it happens in the race, it happens. There's no pacing. I think you're naturally limited by the weight in how other than what Sinead, has a bit of a shtick running with them. But again, I don't actually think she has a faster farmer's carry, because she still has to put them down. So yeah, she runs with them, and then it's cool to watch. It doesn't save anything. Good.
Ollie Frickers and Sean Noble, the people to watch on them, they can run with those kettlebells. But they're two big blokes, so
It's still a shuffle, though, isn't it? Like you said, you sort of look like a bit of a penguin. You're not actually running. I think if you were looking at, you would always have one foot on the ground, so they just move faster. It's impressive. It's a bit. To be fair, in Phoenix, it turned into quite a weapon for sure. I think he put like 20 to 25 seconds, which at that point in the race, it's significant. Like we were talking about the ski in the row, like you might put 7 or 8 seconds to be able to put 20 seconds on what is the shortest station. It's a bit of a weapon. So perhaps it's something that if you're trying to take the sport seriously in training, trying to move a bit faster with them, because the difference between a 125 and a 145 at that point of the race is quite significant. Like you said, it's probably not going to be that much more taxing. I guess it just comes down to pacing and being comfortable moving with them a little bit quicker and doing that in training.
Lunges, I think this is a big game changer, right? There's a couple of ways that you can think about this, because there's a lot of lunges, right? 100 meters is a lot of lunges. For most people, it's going to be anywhere between like 85 and 120 lunges, depending on your leg length, your height, So you need to be efficient with this.
Yeah.
So I say this to people: if you stop for 1 second at the top of every lunge, you've just wasted 100 seconds. So like if you do 100 lunges, right, just to make it easy. So it's a 1 minute 40 of you just standing around doing nothing. And I know they suck, right? So by the time you get to this point in the race, your legs are tired and it's a deep burn. But you need to have a rhythm that you can keep moving forward, and constantly stopping and starting is not good. So I like to do that. I don't step through, and well, in an open race, I step through. But in a pro race, I like to do like a little tap and go. So I think it just puts a little bit less stress on your adductors. So as you're standing back up out of the bottom, just tapping my foot behind me, it allows me to kind of reach a bit further forward as well with that foot that's coming through. So, but this is a point of the race where you need to be, it's not attacking it, but you need to not dawdle. You've got to keep moving forward, because you get into the business end, but you also don't want to send them so much that you can't run off them, because I think this is probably, run 8 is the weirdest of all the runs, because you're most fatigued, but running after lunges is probably the one that affects your ability to produce force and your stride proper changes after this. And then you're going into the baubles. Ruins hopes and dreams everywhere. You just need to practice these and do a lot of them within reason. You need to be careful with training them, because it's easy. In a race, you're probably going to get away with slapping your back knee off the floor and getting some momentum to go forward. In training, you don't want to be doing that, because you're going to end up injured. Control them in training, but don't control them in a race. Just snap it and go. You need to just move forward as fast as possible. I think breathing on these is important as well. It's really easy to, again, because the bag is on your shoulders and you end up wrapping it around you. And these center bags, the smaller ones are almost half full. They start wrapping around you. Just trying to keep your chest up and remember to keep a nice steady breathing rhythm, because you can end up hunched over and then start closing yourself off and struggling to breathe. So nice and smooth and upright, I think, to move forward.
Yeah, I don't think there's much to add. It's not something you can sort of go in with a pacing strategy, other than just to try to do them as efficiently as possible. If you're having a good race, you're probably going to get through them reasonably well. If you're having a bad race, they're just going to add more misery to an already shit day. Look, I do the same thing. It's that little tap, or that like flick of the toe. I don't know what it is, why it works, but there is just something about it. Because you're not really taking any load off. It's not but there is just something, whether it's even a stability thing, I'm not sure, but I do the same thing, and it does make a big difference. If people haven't tried that, try that in training. But again, it's probably much like the other stations, with burpees. Whatever you start with, finish with. If you're a fantastic lunger and you can step through, great. But if not, don't start stepping through. And then, like you said, like with the burpees, have to change your technique mid-race, stop at the top, and then you're standing. Again, if your technique breaks down, it's because of lack of efficiency, and it's because of poor energy management. So whatever technique you start with, you should be able to finish with, because otherwise it's just showing a breakdown of technique. And then all you're doing is managing fatigue. You're not moving well. You're just trying to find a way to manage the fatigue that is accumulating, which is probably a good segue, because obviously if you've got a bunch of fatigue accumulated coming into the last run and the last station, you're probably not on for a PB.
So yeah, this is where like the warbles is where you can properly just leak so much time because
Yeah,
once you drop the ball once, the rest only the rest only feels like a couple of seconds, but it ends up being 25, 30 seconds. And after 4 or 5 stops, you've lost 2.5 minutes without even realizing it. So
yeah,
it's all well and good having a plan for warbles. I haven't ever had a plan that's come off. I've tried loads of different things, and I've got apart from doing millions of them in training now and pacing the race back. I said this a couple of weeks ago. If you've gone too fast up until this point into run A, like it doesn't matter how fit you are, the warbles are going to be horrendous because you've spent everything. It's like running like I said, running 8K pace for a 10K race. You've
yeah,
spent, you've cooked it, and there's nothing left. You need to be leaving yourself enough going into these warbles. So, like I'm on a pro race. I've only gone unbroken once. Like I always end up. I have a plan, and it's always to get over 50 because in my head, if I get over 50, I broke the back of it, and then just see what happens from there. But it's all about keeping your rests really rigid. I think you
yeah,
don't let time just even if you only end up resting for 2 or 3 seconds, psychologically picking the ball back up, and unless you're completely done, you can do 5 or 6 more reps. So you're better off doing that and keeping the momentum going than putting the ball because you're anaerobic after a good chunk of these. You're anaerobic, so resting for 10 to
yeah.
15 seconds really isn't a physical thing. It's more of a psychological thing. You need to pick the ball back up and do a few more reps. Like, do a few more reps, unless you're completely done and lift your arms above your head, and then it's just going to be a mess from there anyway.
So
But if
that's not
you're,
that's not a pacing thing then, is it? It's just
yeah,
that's just an overexertion thing.
capacity. Yeah, but I think you've got to be rigid with these rest periods. Either use a watch with your plan. Like it's okay training them. They don't ever feel. You could do a 2 hour session and do 100 warbles after, and it still wouldn't feel like it does in a race. Like because it is a race, and you've given as much as you can up to this point. But I think don't go to if you can't do 100 or you're not confident you can do 100. Do not go to failure. Stop short, have a short break, and then go again. So if you know that you can probably get to, when you start doing them because you start doing them, and within 10 to 15, if things start feeling weird, then do another 5 or 10, stop and have a short rest and go again. Because if you go completely past that point of no return, your legs really don't work after that.
Yeah.
So stopping just short, 5 reps short, and then having a short break and going again. But there's so many different ways you can do it. Basically, just pace it well and go unbroken.
The one thing I have given to the bit of advice I've given to a few athletes, and not all, but the ones that are worried about their warbles that perhaps don't have really good warbles. And I've done this with a couple, and it seems to have worked all right. They actually get them to actually have like half a gel when they get there. It makes them slow down because they're not. It's probably going to be the difference between them doing 6.5 minute warbles and 5 minute warbles, but it has seemed to help a few people. And even if you don't have a gel, when you get there, like if you can, wipe yourself down, set yourself, take 4 or 5 breaths, like maybe do like 1 or 2 squats because you're so compromised there that like very often that first warball, if you get there a little bit flustered, if you've got a tough judge, because everything's so tight, your hip flexors are so tight, your calves are tight, that first rep can often be a no rep just on depth. I've told a few people like slow right down, take 5, 10, 15 seconds, control your breathing, and then make that first rep a good rep. Because if you can get your breathing in control on the warballs, you'll be able to get a bigger first set. And it's not to say that someone that has never gone unbroken in training, all of a sudden they're going to pull it out of the bag. But if you can put together a bigger first set that's more in control, and then like you said, then stop 3 to 5 reps short. Because say a rep takes 2 seconds. If you go 5 reps past that point, it's another 10 seconds of exposure at a very high metabolic cost. And what that then costs you on the back end is, like you said, your rest becomes uncontrolled. You're basically just at the mercy of how much you don't want to finish the race. Whereas if you stop 5 reps early, 10, it's like saying if you're sprinting as hard as you can, then you get forced to sprint another 10 seconds. That next 10 seconds is so costly. Whereas if you could just pull back, yes, you still might not get a blazing fast wall time, but it's the difference between, like I said, maybe it's your first or second race, and it's the difference between a 7.5 minute and maybe a 5 minute. That's massive. And then in training, work on efficiency. Just, I don't think in training, unless you're at a high level, trying to do big unbroken sets at the end of training is actually particularly effective. I think I've been using a lot of EMOMs more, where I know you do it as well. I know you've got two athletes in Perth I'm sort of friends with, like doing bigger EMOM sets at the end of a hard session, because I think you're instilling more efficiency under fatigue rather than just say we'll do 100 wall balls at the end of a hard workout, because you're going to be doing it in a pretty fatigued state. Whereas I think you're much better off really creating a very, very strong and efficient movement pattern. And you can also, I know, like the athlete in question, I think he's up to 220 wall balls on a 10-minute EMOM. It's a huge amount of volume, but if you said to him, or his name Dave, just do 220 wall balls at the end of the session, he'd probably tell you to fuck off. Whereas if you go make an EMOM, I don't know how it's progressed, whether 4 weeks ago he started at 17 and he's added 1, but it's a lot of volume that's not so costly, that's done at, you'd say, sort of moderate, creeping up to higher intensity, but done efficiently. And I think if you do that, if you've got a really efficient movement pattern at the end of the race, you're much more likely to be able to actually employ that in a race rather than just suffering through 100 wall balls at the end of each session. I do think it is important to try to be able to do 100 wall balls in training, because if you've got the confidence in the back of the mind that skill set's doable, you're more likely to do it in a race. But I think trying to do that too often is probably not the best way to go about it. And maybe it's just from the pure volume standpoint that doing 220 reps is 100% more volume and done at a lower intensity. So you're just creating a better quality movement pattern without all the fatigue.
Yeah, I do it 3 different ways. So that EMOM, we test a minute of, so everyone's slightly different. And the women can generally get out a few more in a minute than the men because the target's lower. Hey, so we test a minute, and then I work out a percentage of that minute. So if they do, so just to make it easy, so if they do 20 reps, that's 30 reps in that minute. We'll take 60% of that to start off with, and they'll do 60. You might start at 5 minutes and build up to 50. The longest we go with it is 15 minutes, and that is grim. So you don't want to be doing that too often. So usually about 10 minutes, I find, is about the sweet spot, because people get from about 160 to, like Dave, I think it's up to 230 now.
Yeah.
Which he's the we do. The EMOM is probably put on the back of it might be put on the back of a long session, or it's usually put on a strength endurance session. The other way is I say you've got 150 reps to do them however you can, so that they start at the end of the session, they start building a plan. The only instructions are, if you drop the ball, you're only allowed to take 5 to 10 seconds rest, and then you go again like you would in a race.
Yeah.
It kind of, it's more than 100, so obviously it's 150, and it's a big mental battle. But that, in time with the good reps that are done with the EMOM, and then heavier reps we do as well. We'll I'll do something that people find pretty cheeky, is like 20 to 30 meters moderate walking lunges straight into 25 to 35 wall balls, usually heavier than pro weights. For a man, it might be 12 kilos, for a woman, 9. Some people, like Dave's girlfriend, actually really does the 150 unbroken. She tried to break him up and found that actually doing the 150 in a 1 was faster and easier, because once we put it down, then everything kind of got a bit sloppier. So, but look, not many people do that. But I think having the full spectrum of doing different things in training, so that you're on race day, you've got different tools to work with. And I've got people to do an EMOM in racing, so they've got there, do 20 reps, 15 to 20 reps, rest for the rest of the minute, and you can do 100 reps in 440, 445, which is it's a decent enough time as an EMOM without you blowing up, and it means you're in control early without blowing up. But then if it doesn't go to plan, then you need to be able to adapt on the fly and go back to this other 5 to 10 second rest and go again. Having everything in your wheelhouse so that you can pick from it on the day, depending on your pacing. The way that you get there is the more important thing, I think, and that's where we need to talk about the running aspect of this race, because it is 55 to 60% of it, and it's where a little tiny dip over the edge can totally ruin your race in the first couple of runs. I don't know, like I don't know how you tell people this, but people ask me I would say pretty much every single day, what pace should I run at for my race? And I've talked about it and tell people all the time that we don't know what pace you're running. And even if I did know what pace you were running, I wouldn't tell you to run at that pace because things change on the day and everything in that environment needs to be evaluated at that time, depending on what else you've done. So if I said to you, Chris, right, you're going to go to the doubles, you need to run 4 minutes per K, and then the Ks are actually only 800 meters, I've seen you off by 45 seconds a run. If it's the other way around and there's a tiny little rock zone and the runs are over, I've blown you up early. So it's okay having a window of kind of what you know the run should be, like from previous races or what I do using that I know at about 3.5 minutes to 3:45, I'm probably going to be going in. And if it's 2.5 minutes, I haven't run enough laps, that's fine.
Yeah.
But you cannot run to a pace. And then what if the venue's hot, the hot venue's humid? What are you going to do then? If it's really busy and you put yourself in a position of anxiety that and chasing a pace that will ruin your race. The same thing happens in running. And I tell people that I coach for just running, and they tell me, what should I run at for this? If you run at a set pace, you're definitely going to, not definitely, in most cases, you're probably either going to sell yourself short and miss out on a bit on the day because you've got that race day adrenaline, or you're going to push too hard too early when it wasn't on, and you're going to blow yourself up and you're going to miss your time anyways. Control is the first thing with this, and trying to learn that RPE that we talked about last week and trying to get those three things, pace, RPE, and heart rate, all in the same thing that you can work it out. The only way this works, though, is if you're honest with yourself and you leave your ego at home and you realize you probably aren't be able to run as fast as you think you are. So you need to chill out. Run 1 and run 2 are a trap. We already talked about that. The effort for run 1 should be almost an extended warm-up where the effort should be 5 to 6 out of 10. 6, you can enter the ski at 6 out of 10, and you know you're top end of zone 3, bottom zone 4, and you're probably all right. And that means that you can breathe, and you shouldn't be out of breath on the first run in the slightest. If you're unconfident and you haven't done many races, the best thing you can do is start at the back of that race pen, or the Red Bull pen. Start at the back, let them all go because the lunatics will go, and then you just run your own race and get on with it. It's a bit different if you're racing, a world champs or an age group thing, and you want to do well. You probably want to be up the front and have a bit of a race, but you still need to run your own race. And even the people in these elite 15s, the majority of them are running their own race and playing to their strengths. So you need to do it too. Chill out and relax. Like run 2 probably isn't at a much higher effort than run 1. So it's probably still a 6-ish out of 10. Like you should still be the first couple of 100 meters, all right, or the first half a lap, your breathing will be elevated, or not so much off the ski, but it will be, and your heart rate will go up because of the change of the modality. And there's nothing you can do about that. Get it back under control. Get your breathing under control. You should not be coming back into the sled panting. You should be totally under control, and it should almost feel too slow. You should feel like you're going too slow if you're doing this properly. It's the same, like people tell you in a marathon that, the first half disappears so quickly and it flies by and it feels in control. If you feel at halfway that you're working already, you've fucked your race. It's the same with this. So you should still feel totally in control after coming off the station. Totally understandable that there'll be some panting and some like heavy breathing, stalker style coming off the sleds, all right? That's fine, but within 30 to 45 seconds, you need to have that back under control so that you can bring your body back into a state where it can, put out a decent output. And we're only talking, right? I will do this in time and pace. We're talking, right? The difference between running 4 minutes, all right, and 4:10 is a massive difference if that is your threshold. Because 10 seconds faster there can send you well over your threshold. So we could go from, if we can use that study, like if 7 or 8 millimole is what most people can handle for a Hyrox because of the changing modalities, you are going to be at a 10 in just 10 seconds. Say you run 10 seconds faster for every run. That's what, a minute 20 faster, right? I guarantee you, if you run that 10 seconds faster for all those runs, you will be 2 or 3 minutes slower on the wall balls. So
Well,
you have
I
to be
think
fully in
I
control.
think I think you probably couldn't even do that math. It would be you couldn't be 10 seconds faster on every run. It'll catch up with you, like we've spoken about in the episode. Whether it catches you at the pull or the burpees, one of those runs will suffer drastically, and then they all will. It's not the case that you could run every run 10 seconds faster, and then it hits you at the wall balls. It will hit you at some point, and that will be sort of dictated by probably a little bit of grit and willpower, and some people probably have that ability to hold on a bit longer, but they're probably then it costs them even more, or really just where your sort of aerobic capacity limits you, or where you're perhaps most inefficient. You might be a bit of a sled monster, and you can sort of maybe you get through the sleds on pure strength, but say you're a bigger guy, and then your burpees become a 4.5 minute burpee, and then all of a sudden those runs just start to drift massively. But you said it best. It doesn't sound like much, and in training, it's probably if you're doing just a pure threshold interval type session, maybe the difference between a 4 minute K and a 4:10 doesn't feel like much. But in the context of a race, it's everything, because, like you said, you are dealing with these highly fluctuating lactate and fatigue levels, and there's just and then you're relying on being a little bit. You need to sort of almost be a little bit under threshold on your runs, because you need that little bit of aerobic capacity, like we're talking about. When you use that anaerobic battery, like, it's the aerobic system that's got to clean that up. So if the aerobic system is already operating at its absolute limit, and then you sort of flood it with this influx of these anaerobic waste products, it very quickly tips over. So I think you sort of need to be, your runs probably just, unless you're a very accomplished racer and fantastic at pacing, you're best served to be that 10 seconds under what you think you can probably run. It's just going to serve you better in the race, because everything will just move more smoothly. And again, you're not going to have those big blow-ups on station. You should be able to move through everything at a decent cadence, feel like you're in control, rather than being overtaken or overwhelmed by any number of the stations that are going to expose that weakness.
Yeah, it's not about it turning the runs into a full-on recovery jog. It's about
No.
turning them into a controlled effort, so that
Yeah.
you're not hanging on, so that you don't leak time everywhere. It honestly doesn't take that much of a so when I say slow down, I'm talking about slowing down a couple of seconds on a run to bring the effort down can actually save you that quite quickly in a station. So the station could be, if you're in the burpees and you've ran 10, 15 seconds too quick into there, you could lose 30, 40 seconds already. And then coming out of that, like you said, you're
Yeah.
already above, and then the time's just going to go out the back door. So totally in control in the first half. The second half, it's going to feel like a higher 7 out of 10, but that it should still be cruise control. After coming out of stations and recovering, you're back into cruise control, and that's where it should be. This race is not a VO2 max race. And I know that all over Instagram and TikTok, it gets people excited about how hard Hyrox is. Hyrox is only really, really hard if you've got shit aerobic capacity, if you pace it like a bell end, and you don't give it the respect it deserves. Like, if you do it properly, it's not a super hard race. It's a controlled 60, 90 minutes. There's things that we can't help you with, but if you can't let your ego go and just control the race, yeah, sure, it's a 10 out of 10. Once you go 10, 9 or 10, you ain't coming back, because that's not how the energy systems work. You've dug yourself a hole, and it is a long old grind. I know, I've been there. My first couple of races were I ran too fast, and stations were all awful. And I learned very quickly that that's not the way to do it. And then since then, I've got much better results by pacing it better, controlling it. And that's how I get everybody else to do it as well. You're actually allowed to enjoy this. You can enjoy the hobby that you've picked. It doesn't have to be, it can be a challenge, but it doesn't have to be a complete death march. You can smile and enjoy it and be in control and still put out a really high effort, and then go and do unbroken wall balls and finish the race really strong. And the more you do it, the more you'll find out where you can push and where you can hold back and what suits you. And everyone is slightly different. And that's the way. Some people will be stronger at stations, some people will be stronger at the runs. And that's for you to work out. And that's where race experience is really important. But you don't learn anything in a race if you go out and send the first 10 minutes, because nothing else is actionable after that. Everything else is a shit show. So you've not learned anything. So go in, slow down that first half, relax, control it. I've repeated myself there, but
No,
I
but
don't think I can say it enough, because people will ignore
it's worth repeating. And I say this to athletes all the time. A race is just one point in time where you can express your current level of fitness. It's not a place to try to find new fitness. I've said to people often, like, you can't fluke a good race. Like, you can't find a new level of fitness that didn't exist before because you want it, because I'm the hardest worker in the room. Like, you cannot fluke a good race. You can only ever express the fitness you have. You can absolutely fluke a bad race. You can. I've coached enough people that have just fucking ruined 12. I shouldn't say ruined, but they have really let themselves down by trying to do too much. And again, it's always in that first run ski run where, and yeah, you guys are kind of lucky in Europe because you've got so many races that perhaps not everyone matters. But the APAC scene, it's like we basically have a race per quarter, and they're massive events, and everyone gets really excited. Most people have done a 12 to 16 week block. And of course, they haven't undone the hard work, but it is meaningful. Like, everyone wants to race well, and you don't want to feel like, the last however many 200 training hours have gone into blowing it in the first 10 minutes. Like I said, you can't fluke a good race, but you can absolutely fluke a bad race by not pacing it well. You're well served to really in training. I think particularly as you come close to that race, practice your pacing. Like you said, you've got to know how those first runs have got to feel. And like, I think a 5 or 6, and I sort of say to people, you should be able to almost look around and have a conversation on the ski and really be able to take it in. And if you've got friends there, like, smile for the camera. If you can do that, you're probably in a pretty good position. If you think you've gone too hard, then you almost definitely have.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's do the last little bit here. We won't do any questions today because we've already been going for a good chunk of time. So we'll change it up to, so we said last week, we're going to go for a win, a whinge, or a working on, right? So it's not negative, and I'm not just moaning about social media every week. What is your one of the W's this week?
Well, I maybe had a little bit of a whinge. I had someone come to me who'd come from a coach that was pretty high level and pretty well known, and had been told that this coach didn't believe in compromised running, but then they'd programmed all this Hyrox specific work that wasn't specific at all. It was just random circuits with Hyrox movement. And I just said, I didn't want to begrudge him, but I said, I always say to people, you've got your fitness and you've got your conditioning. So fitness is all the aspects. You've got running fitness, ski fitness, sled push fitness. You have all these different components that you can train to be as fit as possible. And your conditioning is your ability to bring that fitness together and execute on race day. So whether you believe in, and there's maybe an episode on this, whether you actually believe in compromised running, I did a post on this. There is it's not a scientific term. It's not, it's not gravity. It is made up to a point. Everyone knows what it is, and the demands of the race. Why on earth wouldn't you practice parts of that race in training? It's like this coach had come with this old belief, and I think it used to be a bit more prevalent. There's just running, but then they were trying to program Hyrox specific stuff that wasn't even Hyrox specific. It was just 500 meter ski, 30 meter kettlebells. Like, that's just a circuit. When in Hyrox do you do the ski into the farmer's carry? It's like, there was just this cognitive dissonance. Like, well, we've got to do something sort of Hyroxy, but we can't do compromised running because I don't believe in compromised running. It was sort of like a little bit infuriating that people are paying good money to get pretty low quality programming, and it showed up. They did a 16-week block and got worse. That's my whinge.
Like, I don't understand it. Like, I don't do race pace compromise running all the time. That I found that you don't actually need to improve in compromise running. If you do moderate level compromise running, your heart rate is almost as high as it is in a tempo session anyway. Like last week, I managed to do 90 minutes of a compromised running session, and the run pace was like moderate, but my heart rate was in the tempo position for the whole time, and it feels so different from any other type of running. Like, so you can get as good at running as you want. You need to learn how it feels to run compromised after a station. So you need to learn how to get your heart rate back down, your breathing rate back down after a station, even doing it at a moderate level, and understand that weird feeling you're getting in your legs after pushing a heavy sled or pulling a heavy sled or whatever is not real. Like, it's not, especially after the sled push. See that first 30 to 40 seconds after the sled push, that feeling you feel in your legs won't last forever, but you can learn to deal with it. So it's a skill.
Of course it's a skill and it's trainable. I think it's both. I mean, it's both physical and psychological. Like you said, yeah, that there is nothing like running out of pushing a heavy sled, however long it takes, whether it's 300 meters or 400 meters. Again, as long as you don't run too fast and you can train that, so you don't want to be sprinting out of a sled push. But there's a physiology behind it. As your body is clearing that extra bit of lactate that's been produced from the sled push, and then there's also a feeling. Again, I think there was a post this morning. I think it was Steve Magnus talking about the body doesn't like surprises. So if you're not doing some sort of compromised running in your training, that feeling is going to be this massive surprise. Obviously, you've done lots of races, you're getting practice, but if you know the exact demands of the race, so it's a SED principle, specific adaptation to imposed demand. Like, you know what the race is, so practice it in training and do it at different intensities. I do some overpace stuff, just like 1 RP higher than race pace, but shorter intervals with the theory that obviously if we could get the body used to slightly faster paces, that if we can then improve all of our fitness components underneath, we should be able to execute a little bit differently on race day. But I'm certainly going to bring in some of the slower, like longer tempo runs into maybe a shorter station. But you can change the stimulus slightly. It all has the same effect. I mean, you're trying to basically train the body and the system to deal with the known conditions of race day. People don't get better at playing tennis by playing squash and badminton and every other racket sport and then hope it just comes together on the day because they've played general racket sports. Like, train what you're trying to get better at.
Yeah, that's the fun of it. I used to play squash, but I couldn't play any of the other racket sports. I looked like I had some kind of issue with my arms. But so yeah, I started this last week or so. So I've been thinking about when we talked about, and I said my treadmill at home and my threshold runs, basically I have to turn it up to ridiculous speed, and it feels like my legs are almost out of control. So I've decided that I'm going to try some uphill or high gradient threshold and tempo type stuff, and see what happens to that, because I think it's quite a similar feel. I did it this morning. It's quite a similar feeling to compromise running, without me feeling like my cadence is 200, which makes me feel like I'm on a bike. So I'm going to try this for a little while. So this morning I did 10 minutes of tempo, in just more of a just like extended warm up, and then 8 by 3 minutes at 6% gradient, and with 1 minute recovery, still at 6%, but at 10k an hour. And it was quite easy to control my heart rate. It went up. It was in threshold, but I think I don't really have any issue with sticking the gradient on, and it affecting my calves or anything. But I think that because I'm conditioned to it, I'm going to give this a go and see if I can get any new stimulus, because I've been running for so long now that my threshold pace it just feels like, to get it on a treadmill, it feels crazy. Like outside, it's a little bit easier, but it's still dark here in the morning. So I'm going to try this and work on some uphill running, basically uphill threshold running, to see if I can get a similar stimulus. And this morning, it did feel like the last 2 or 3 reps felt more like a compromise run coming off the back end at the back end of a race. So I'm interested to see if I can get any improvements. So it was 8 by 3 minutes I started with this morning, just to see where I'm at. I don't know much. I'll probably go 4 minutes, but I want to keep it so that I can keep the lap low enough. I think it would squirt up high enough there with too much of it uphill. I've got a kit, so I might actually test it. I'm racing next week. The week after, I might actually test it and see what it comes out as, heart rate comparison wise. But when I used my VT this morning, the ventilatory threshold was pretty much top end of zone 3, bottom zone 4. So it was easier for me to get my heart rate up without me feeling like my legs were doing 10 to the dozen.
Yeah. Very good. I think we said next week we do a full Q&A episode, didn't we? So I said we'll leave the Q&A. I think we've given people 90 minutes. We're obviously just encouraging people to do more volume, easy volume, of course. Maybe each week we'll just add 10 minutes. By proxy, we're just helping people progressively overload their volume. The good people that we are in coaching. We'll end up just doing Joe Rogan. We'll do Joe Rogan length 3-hour episodes by the end of the year, so people go out for their 3-hour runs.
Yeah. Well, I've got to go back to work, so probably not today. So if you've got any comments, the last couple of weeks we've got some good comments on the post. So if you've got comments and questions, stick them on, and then like every good YouTuber, like and subscribe. Apparently that does well
Okay.
for our content, get some reach out there. So yeah, thanks, Chris, and I'll chat to you next week.
Always a pleasure, mate.
Cheers, buddy.
That was good.